Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the keynote for today's Equity Conference. Our keynote for today is Coalition and Community Building and Dreaming in Tough Times, featuring Woodard Henderson from the Highland Center and Alex Tom from the Center for Empowered Politics. My name is Chris Cox. I am the Associate Vice President for CFA's for Racial and Social Justice North, as well as a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Interdisciplinary Social Sciences at San Jose State. And I'm honored to be here with you all today. I am a pretty dark-skinned African-American man. I've got a mustache, no goatee today. I have glasses that are my replacement glasses for glasses that I've previously broken. So these have some kind of interesting blue tinge to them. And I'm sitting in front of our CFA Equity Conference logo 2026, Thriving Through the Chaos, Resistance During Turbulent Times. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and compatriot, Dr. Tracy Salisbury.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Tracy Salisbury. I am Associate Professor of Ethnic Studies at Cal State Bakersfield, the department I also helped found in 2022. I am a honey brown colored African American woman. I'm wearing glasses with green frames. I have very long dreadlocks that go way past my shoulders. I am a soon to be 60-year-old woman on April 1st, which I'm very excited about. I've enjoyed every year. And if you look me up anywhere, you will find out I am the angry Black woman that your mother might have told you about. I am wearing a CFA t-shirt and also have the CFA background for the Equity Conference. It is my great pleasure to introduce Ashley Woodard Henderson. Ashley Woodard Henderson is an Appalachian woman from Southeast Tennessee, rooted in the working class and raised in a long tradition of the Southern freedom movements. A lifelong strategist, storyteller, and organizer, she has devoted her life to turning liberation from theory to practice, building pathways where courage, collaboration, and imagination meet. Through utopian visions, her evolving home for strategy and imaginations, Ashley helps movements, coalitions, and institutions build independent ecosystems of real power. One branch of this work, Experiments for Good, imagines and implements experiments that serve our common good, including We Act, an emerging app designed to deepen community through shared calls to action. Her work invites people to remember that freedom isn't only possible, it's something we can design, build, and live together.
Great, thank you for that. And now I'm going to introduce Alex Tom. Alex T. Tom is the former executive director of the Chinese Progressive Association in San Francisco. Currently, he's the executive director of the Center for Empowered Politics, a new capacity building project that aims to train and develop new leaders of color and grow movement infrastructure. Alex received the OSF Racial Justice Fellowship to develop a toolkit to counter the rise of the new Chinese right wing in the US. Welcome, Alex Tom.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Alex Tom. I'm with the Center for Empowered Politics, and I am an Asian American cisgender male who is a youngish looking 50-year-old. I'm light skinned with black shoulder length hair, and I'm wearing a gray button up short sleeve. No glasses today. I use he, him pronouns. And I got a golden doodle puppy and an 11-year-old awesome autistic kiddo who might be in the background Zoom bombing. And I use he, him pronouns. So I wanted to just first say that I'm very honored to be on this panel and stage with Ash, who has been a longtime movement leader. Want to give her some praise here. She's going to get more praise later. That has thrown down in so many ways, folks know, and all the way from the South to national leadership. She has been bringing along people and been doing this for a very long time. So I've been very grateful for her leadership, and just want to say she's my leader, and I got her back. And also, I've seen her. We've been in a lot of different meetings, conferences, maybe together, but have not had a chance to catch up. So this is a good opportunity to do that. I wanted to also, for what I'm going to say, just I wanted to share a couple lessons from our movement elders, who I will introduce, and then also some questions I'm grappling with in this moment. And I just want to say, the way you all have rolled with so much care and intention preparing for this gathering, this conference, just reading through the themes, I just want to lift up some things that have been really that resonant with me. And the first one around thriving, meaning having care, courage, and joy at the same time, and also security. Thinking about the kind of chaos that's happening right now, the accelerated way that this administration, the right wing, has really pushed and also has really tried to break our solidarity. Remembering that resistance is a collective action, I think that's also really important. And finally, community that is local and global. So that is all very resonant to me. And what I wanted to do is share a couple of lessons from our elders, and also do that to introduce myself into the space a little bit more. And, I was at the Chinese Progressive Association for 15 years, and that started in the 1970s. And we organized in the Chinese working class community, so organizing workers, youth, and their families. And we had a predecessor organization that was called the Chinese Worker Mutual Aid Association. And that started in 1938. So I come from, or we all do, a long lineage, as many of us know, but having touch points with people in Chinatown who were still there and alive and 100 years old in Chinatown when I started working there. And for them to share the stories of hunger marches during the Great Depression with white and black workers in Chinatown, to fast forwarding to being inspired by the Panthers around how to build racial solidarity, economic solidarity. This we I feel like I'm living in the lineage of something over 80 years of an arc. So these lessons are what keep me going. Here are three I wanted to share. The first one is about people and organizations, and I'm sure this is probably true for your peers, other faculty members, students. I'll say in the movement sector, people are really worried about their organizations getting crushed, and that Trump is going to come after people's tax status and all that. And some of that is a little bit it is being too precious about our organizational forms. And so I just remember talking to this elder, and he was just talking about the 1950s when the movement was crushed for a very long time by McCarthyism. And I just remember him saying, like, look, they can crush your organization, but your people and spirit lives on in new forms. And he just talked about how the survivors of the 1930s that went underground in the 50s and had children, and their children became leaders of the civil rights movement. And also the elders came back in the 70s to help many of my OGs, to form the Chinese Progressive Association. The second lesson is from the Panthers. Many of our founders, now I'm talking about the founders from the 70s, they were very inspired by Black liberation, because it was the Panthers who came into Chinatown to tell the Chinese immigrants and the lumpen, the people who were on the streets, who were in gangs, and they they told us about what was happening in the Chinese Revolution at that time. And so many in China, and so many of our founders were very excited to become the Chinese Black Panther Party, which the Panthers said that's not a good idea. The Panthers said you should really form and organize your own community and then link up with other communities like ourselves. And so this is the lesson of communities taking self-determination and being in solidarity, but it's not everything is the same in every community. So we had the Red Guards had a 10-point or 11-point program that was modeled and shaped by the Panthers. And it was different in our community. The last lesson I wanted to share here is intergenerational leadership. So what I've already shared is leaders from the 30s to the 70s. And you know, in the 70s, these leaders from the 30s, they're old by then, they saw these young activists, leftists, who were popular in the 60s and 70s. They did not try to tell them what to do, but they did guide them and accompany them. And this was very important because some of them, some of the elders, the OOGs from the 30s, did want to tell the young people what to do, but they decided that they just need to follow the energy of the young people and who they assessed as the quote advanced youth. And this is very important in how I think about the next, well, so I'm 50 now, so I look at the young people in the same way. It's like you might not agree with all the things they're doing, but they're also looking for a humble leadership as well and a mentorship that is not about being prescriptive, but about learning from them, like a bidirectional intergenerational wisdom. And then in my last couple minutes, I'm just going to share just some questions I'm sitting with. I'm excited to get into the conversation with Ash about this. Is three things. It's about leadership, strategy, and then how do we build solidarity working together? Some people call it the bigger we, majoritarian strategy. So for leadership, I think this is one of the things I'm noticing in our movement space, and I'm just grappling with it, is that some are very fearful and are just already getting ready to build the bunker to go underground. And some are just going all out, right? And I think we need to have like a balanced approach of like how we're leaning in right now. We should definitely be preparing for all scenarios, but we also have to be really razor sharp about what's needed right now, which is to stop the rise of authoritarianism, fascism, and doing what we can to be doing that. And we don't need to wait for everyone either, right? I think there's a paralysis of analysis and also this tendency to wait for everyone to be on the same page. We can be building a coalition of the willing, coalition of the doing to actually move forward and just keep the door open. Keep the door open, let people come along when and if they're going to be ready. That's going to be important. The second thing is around strategy. And this is something Ash has always said and has always reminded us is that we need all tools at our disposal, all strategies, diversity of tactics. And for me, it's important to lift up, we need diversity of forms. Some are going to be formless, but you need some kind of forms and you need all of them. And I think that's going to be really important for us to move into this because I do feel like sometimes we're still in this place where it's like, oh, my strategy is better than your strategy, or this is what we're doing. And it's like, no, we need all of that right now. And that gets into the last thing about just like this kind of solidarity. And, you know, and I've done a lot of research and work in the Chinese immigrant community. And I just will say very explicitly, the anti-Blackness runs very deep in our communities, not just ours, but under racial capitalism. It's all our communities, but it's very specific too in the Chinese community. I can talk more about that, but I also want to name that there's always a legacy of an untold kind of radical legacy of solidarity that, the system does not want us to see and not understand. And we got to just keep remembering that, as our elders have said. But we also have to remember we have a lot of people to bring along, a lot of people in my own community, which I would say Chinese American, but also Asian American. And I think it's important that we have that posture not to write people off. And so I'll just leave it at that. There's more I could say, and I'm looking forward to getting into it more with Ash next.
Awesome. Y'all show some love to my brother Alex Tom. I'm Woodard Henderson. And I'm so excited to be here with y'all today. I use she, her pronouns, or any said respectfully and in right relationship. I am a blackety black woman with relatively light skin, caramel skin, and skin grafts. I have a pretty significant afro that's salt and pepper. And I'm in my sweetheart's office, so there's any number of things from our kids and grandkids and her and me that you might see before the end of this sacred time that we're together. I want to also show some love to Alex, who I've known for what feels like more than a lifetime now. It is an honor always to get to be in your presence, fam, and feels like a family reunion. And I want to thank CFA, of which I am such a fangirl. I'm so grateful for your courage. I'm so grateful for your work. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today in this keynote. So, I'm going to talk way less about me and a whole lot about what I understand to be about you all. In part because I think some of what we all should be learning about the infrastructure needed for this time is coming from you all, my love. So let's start with you. Y'all are at an equity conference on a Saturday during a week when my understanding is that the federal government has told you and universities like yours that equity is in fact the problem. The EEOC has your colleagues' phone numbers. CSU Bakersfield, where Dr. Salisbury teaches, received faculty layoff notices early this month, is what I've been told. And despite the fact that there's been a 25% enrollment growth over the last 2 years, there's been a decline in funding. We're going to talk about that in a second, though. I raised those conditions because my assessment is that your presence at this equity conference, your presence in CFA is not neutral. It is a choice, and it is a choice to be honored in a time where people are obeying and complying with evil forces that are making it harder and harder to educate, but also to then do with education what we ought to be doing, which is to save the world and thriving together in healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. I'm a movement strategist. I'm an organizer. I'm an activist. And what I want to do in the time that we have allotted is be honest about where we are, clear about what we're up against, and practical about what we build from here. The chaos is not new at all. Many of you on this call is like, girl, we've been living like this. And that's true. But what's new is that more people are experiencing what Black and Indigenous and immigrant communities have always known. The system was never broken. It's certainly not broken by this administration, though they are tearing shit up. What we know is that this system is working as it was designed to work. Our job then becomes whether or not we will fix it. And I would assess that our job is not to fix it, it's to build something so much better, something that we've always deserved, while the old thing shakes apart. Let me name what I find to be the strategic problem, though, because I think it's the thing that most people in some of our movement spaces won't say out loud. The opposition is building pipelines, 30, 40, 50-year infrastructure. Some people would say even longer than that. Just to give some examples, right? The Federalist Society moves people from law school to the federal bench over decades. ALEC writes model legislation that drops into state houses across the country, and they've been building up folks to write those policies and then run for offices to implement those policies for decades. The Heritage Foundation had Project 2025 ready because of their decades of work to develop the project, not just the policy platform, but the training apparatus and all of it. It was ready on day one because they've been working on it for years. That's a pipeline. They move ideology, what they believe, what they think, to policy, right? The rule of law, to power and the consolidation of their wealth. We we build campaigns, progressives, lefties. Sometimes we win them, sometimes we lose them. Sometimes people burn out, sometimes we win or lose and start over. Don't go tweeting that Ashley said campaigns don't matter. I actually love campaigns. I love developing them. I love strategizing around them. I love implementing them and learning from them. But a campaign without infrastructure is a treadmill. You can run real hard, but you're not really going to go very far. You might go an inch forward or an inch backward, but you're not really moving anywhere. So, what would it look like for us to be intentional, especially as educators, about thinking about that pipeline, both faculty, support staff, and students, much more holistically and over a greater span of time? What would it look like if we stopped romanticizing the opposition? I hear my sweetheart in my head because she says we keep describing the water that we're drowning in. I want to be frank with you. I find nothing about the opposition, the people that are trying to make it impossible for you to live your lives and do your jobs, to be genius. I think they're not innovative. They're not playing chess while we play checkers. They just sometimes are more disciplined than us. They're sometimes more consistent than us. They sometimes invest in the long game in ways that we don't or can't. But we could do that too. CFA has actually already done it. You adopted an anti-racism and social justice transformation resolution, what, back in 2015? You built this conference, you fought for and you won an ethnic studies graduation requirement. That didn't happen in one electoral cycle or grant cycle or academic cycle. That's infrastructure that you've built over time. That's what thinking about pipelines looks like on our side. The question is whether you recognize what you've built, my friends, and whether y'all will protect it with the same discipline that they are bringing, the opposition is bringing to tearing down what you've built. And here's another thing I want to name. When the system is demanding that your participation in its own violence is absolute and necessary or a given, you again are at choice. When the EEOC subpoenaed Cal State LA for the personal contact information of every employee, CSU management could have said, we'll cooperate with the lawful process, right? We won't break the law, but we won't hand over our people's private information without protecting their rights. But instead, they complied. They gave up phone numbers and emails before your union could get to court. But CFA chose differently. They didn't cooperate. They didn't obey. They sued, right? You sued. That's the difference between compliance and non-cooperation. Compliance says the powerful ask for it, so we have to obey. Non-cooperation says we'll engage with the process, but we won't be the instruments of harm to our own people. Every person in this virtual space that we're creating together is going to face that choice again and again. In fact, most of you already are. But if we wait till the pressure is on us to figure out our values around these things, it's already too late. So let's get to the heart of why I think I was invited here. I just want to be honest with you that I don't assess that we can build a durable multiracial coalition without confronting anti-Blackness. I think Alex's words about this are exactly right. And I want to add a little bit to it. I also don't think we can build a multiracial coalition without confronting patriarchy. I actually think they're not separate add-ons, the fight against anti-Blackness and the fight against patriarchy. I think they're actually foundational to the success of our work. So what we know is anti-Blackness is the operating system of American racial hierarchy. Patriarchy is the operating system of gender and sexual hierarchy. And at the intersection, at the crossroads of race and gender and sexuality are the people that are bearing the most disproportionate harm from both systems. People that look and love and laugh like me. Black women, Black non-binary folks, Black queer and trans people. And if your coalition is not organized around the needs and leadership of the people at those intersections, it's just not yet a liberation coalition in its fullest. It's a reform project that will reproduce the hierarchies it claims to fight all too often. And let's be concrete. CFA's Shortchanging Students report showed that as the CSU got more diverse, as more Black and brown students enrolled, instructional spending went down. The money went to consultants, to campus police, to administrative salaries, to capital projects, not to the classrooms where most vulnerable students were sitting. That's the institutional expression of anti-Blackness. It doesn't require a slur. It only requires a system that consistently devalues the people it claims to serve and the faculty who serve them. And when you look at who bears the brunt of that devaluation, who's on contingent contracts, who carries the invisible labor of mentoring students that the institution underserves, who's most exposed to layoffs, those patterns of patriarchy and anti-Blackness are right there in your data. And look at the federal attack. The EEOC investigation came through anti-Semitism complaints. And we know anti-Semitism is real and it has to be confronted. What we also know is that there was a clear target, and it's your ethnic studies requirement, your equity programming, your faculty diversity initiatives. The entry point was anti-Semitism, but the target is the entire infrastructure of racial and social justice in your work. That's the strategy. They divide us by making us argue about which kind of discrimination matters most, while they dismantle the structures that address all of it, the infrastructure that you built. So what does it look like in practice? It looks like asking on every campus, in every chapter, who are the most vulnerable people in our community right now? Not in the abstract, literally, concretely, right now. And are we organizing around their needs or just around what's comfortable? It looks like examining who leads your coalitions, not who's on the flyer, but who makes the decisions. Whose analysis shapes the strategy? If the people most impacted are not leading the response, then the response won't address what they're facing. And it means moving through the hard conversations, not around them or ignoring them altogether. If your multiracial coalition has never had a hard conversation about anti-Blackness, about patriarchy, it is not a coalition, it's a photo op. If your organization has never examined how patriarchy operates in its own meetings, how anti-Blackness shows up in decision making, it might very well be reproducing what it claims to fight. So what do we actually build from here, Ash? I'm glad you asked. Let me be specific. We need shared analysis, not just shared outrage, because outrage burns fast. And don't get me wrong, I'm a perpetually pissed off human being. Analysis lasts, right? Shortchanging students gave every chapter, every branch a shared factual foundation. And you can walk that into a budget hearing. You can walk that into board meetings. You can say, here's what's happening. Here's the evidence. Here's what we demand. Every coalition needs that, not just a feeling, a framework that names root causes and makes the connections visible. We need to build multi-tactical and multi-sectorally. You already heard Alex speak to this. We need marches. We need lawsuits. We need electoral work. All of it coordinated. Your legal team in court challenging EEOC subpoenas. Your organizers building for a solidarity rally at Bakersfield. Your chapters doing political education with members who are scared, not just apathetic or not just more conservative than others, but who need analysis, not just reassurance. We need low ego, high impact. Nobody needs to be the hero. We all are. The work needs to get done, right? We need to remember that organized people beat organized money. CFA organized against $375 million in proposed budget cuts, petitions to the Capitol. That report is a weapon. And by the time the final budget came through, the outright cut was gone, replaced with $144 million in deferral, right? That organizing changed the terms. Your organizing changed the terms. And power is not just about that moment. It's about the practice that built enough power for you to get what you deserve. The question is whether you can demonstrate it repeatedly, if you can sustain it. Every budget cycle, every contract fight, every election. And y'all, we've got to get back to real organizing, not just recruitment, not just mobilization. I want to be specific about what I mean. Mobilizing is getting people to show up to your thing. Organizing is building people's capacity to lead their own thing. If you're measuring success is crowd size or just, how many people are showing up to meetings, that's mobilizing. If your measure of success is how many new leaders emerged, you're organizing. How much more power do they have before we were building relationship together? That's organizing. CFA has the bones for this. 23 campuses, 29,000 members, chapters, caucuses, a council, this conference. The question is whether you're using those structures to turn people out or to develop their capacity to lead in their own communities and classrooms. The second is harder. Sometimes it's slower. Sometimes it's less photogenic. And it's the only thing that lasts. We've got to build these structures, not just heroes. Y'all last because you're a union. You got dues, staff, chapters, elections. It doesn't collapse if any one of us burns out. You've got to protect this infrastructure, the caucuses, CRSJ. You've got to protect this conference. You've got to make sure that you're developing the next generation and not just depending on the current one. to Alex's point about intergenerational organizing. You got to build spaces that can hold what people are actually feeling. I'm sure y'all came here because you were exhausted, you were tired, you're scared, you want to build community with each other. You might be holding a lot of feelings all at once: rage and joy, courage and fear, grief and hope. Those are not contradictions. They're all the full human experience of this moment. If your movement space can only hold one of these at a time, if it's all rage and no joy, or all hope and no grief, people are going to leave. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel like they're being fully seen. The people who built the caucus structure, who show up at your rallies, who sing and eat and grieve and strategize with you, they're creating spaces together where people can bring all of themselves. This is the infrastructure of a movement that doesn't burn its people out. So every period of repression, like this one, is also a period of movement building, or should be. Build wider, my friends, build deeper, be low ego, high impact, be embedded in community, be accountable to the people most impacted. And if you do, not only will you generate hope, you'll actualize a plan. And a plan with hope is going to win every time. Thanks for having me.
Ooh, wow. That was amazing. If I'm going to speak to it, um, shall we start with a few questions, Chris? Would you like to ask the first question? Because if I ask my question, I'll be starting something.
Why don't you go ahead and start something?
Okay. Um, Ashley, I hear you, but I guess what we're collectively being called right now, the 92% Black women, um, nobody loves us. Nobody loves us. It's not shown. Your words spoke truth, but Black women don't get that benefit. I'm angry.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling the love. I'm doing this work because I know I have to, but I don't feel included. I feel more outside than I've ever felt in my 59 years. Because right now, Black women have been crushed. Over 600,000 jobs lost. No one says anything. Um, the Target boycott being called off by a Black man who didn't start the boycott is raging right now. Um, it never seems to cease. People really do think Black women are Zora Neale Houston mules, and you ride us till we fall over. But what I am noticing for the first time in my life, that Black women are choosing to stay at home, that Black women are choosing to do something different. And I think people have not noticed that it's different. This is the first time ever I feel in an election coming that Black women will stay at home, that they won't vote because Democrats have said nothing different. Black male community leaders have said nothing different. White women continue to prove they are not allies. And now it's more people, it's people of color. And it's devastating. And I'm trying to find that thing because I know we have to be in the mix. But right now, I don't know what that is. I'm emotional about it. I know what we need to do, but I also know it feels so right that if we choose not to do it, maybe you get along this time by yourself. Because if we're constantly going to be at the bottom and figure out ways to survive at the bottom, then why do it?
Yeah. 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 I mean, just for folks that don't know what we're talking about when we talk about the 92%, that's the what, 9 in 10 women, Black women that showed up to vote for the Harris campaign. I'll tell you, one of the things that startles me about that number before I answer your question, Doc, is that, I'm a Black woman that lives in a winner take all state. I don't have the privilege of living in a place like California. So I voted for her knowing that my vote wasn't going to count anyway, right? Some of my folks in Georgia, after being told by folks on the coast that their vote would never matter, still showed up with like white supremacists in an open carry state in front of their capital to try to win this election. But folks who had had returned, great migration back to Georgia from places like Chicago and Oakland and New York City, were like, oh, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein because Kamala was a prosecutor in a state where governors didn't expand Medicaid, right? Like, this is the kind of multiple truths, dialectical reality we're living in, where purity politics, quite frankly, I think will get us killed. Let me just be straight up about it. What I also want to say is that multiple things are true right now at the same time, right? So, as much as my TikTok feed shows me the 92%, some of whom are paid people to talk about the fact that Black women are sitting this out, let's just be 100. Like, some of them girls is getting paid
Yeah.
by right wingers to tell us to just be quiet. But I'm certainly seeing that, like, on my TikTok feed and my Instagram feed and my Facebook feed, right? But when I go outside, I see folks like M. Adams and Paris Hatcher and Mary Hooks. I see Charlene Carruthers. I see Alicia Garza. I see Patrice. I see all sorts of Black girls across generations out here still making waves out of no ways. When I just came from California, I saw Black girls doing EJ work from all over the country. That's when I was in LA. When I was in San Diego, I saw National Nurses United with all their folks, all these Black folks, all these brown and Black folks that are literally making ways out of no ways while philanthropy retrenches. But even when I'm in philanthropy, I'm seeing Black girls. Alicia Garza is the senior vice president of a major foundation from right there in your great state. Well, I mean, we stole her. She lives in Georgia now, but
Yeah.
she's from Cali, right? So it's like I feel like I'm in this hamster wheel. And if I look out the right side of the hamster wheel, I see people telling me to sit down and shut up, rest as revolution, all these things. And if I look out of the other side, I see Black women being asked to save the world with no resources to do it, right? So I say it that way to confirm that you are not crazy. You might be, we all might be crazy,
Crazy. Just a
and
little.
rightfully so in this condition, right? But that I get it if it's confusing and if you feel pulled in multiple ways, because actually we are getting pulled in multiple ways. The opposition does nothing but benefit if Black women sit down. And the irony is that everybody benefits when Black girls win, right? Look at affirmative action, right? We win affirmative action. Black women, as much as Black dudes get credit for it, Black women win affirmative action, and white women are the biggest beneficiaries. Everybody went, like, this is why I talked about patriarchy and anti-Blackness in the same breath, because if we beat back white supremacy and racism and anti-Blackness without addressing patriarchy, we will still lose. And if we address patriarchy without identifying anti-Blackness, we will still lose. We've actually got to be doing at the intersection, and I don't know how to do it in a way that gets us what we deserve if we're not at the table and driving the car when those things are getting discussed, whether it's policy, whether it's politics, whether it's our union building work or whatever. Does that disproportionately put the work on us? Hell yeah. Do I like that? Hell no. Is it the truth though? Yep. And what I've been told is that if those of us with some sense, this goes back to what Alex said about like everybody ain't gonna make it. If those of us that are willing to be grown-ups in this season, low ego, high impact, are willing to put our selfish desires, because trust, I would love nothing more than just sit in my front porch and mind my own damn business, right? But if I'm willing to overstretch and be uncomfortable and have hard conversations with people, some that I love and some that I don't even know, for the sake of being able to live a better life and for all of us to live a better life more abundantly, then that's my responsibility. And, some of y'all I can get if I talk about it materially, right? Like literally my material condition will change. Some of y'all like me come from spiritual folks who would say, and it's my responsibility. It is my calling. Some of us are called to do this work, right? It's ecclesia. We are literally, we are set apart to be in right relationship with each other, to do the sacred work of beloved community building, heaven right here on earth. And I see CFA doing that. You're doing it, and not only are you doing it when it's popular, like over the last 10 years until Trump got reelected, but you're now doing it when it's actually like not only discouraged, it's prosecuted, it's persecuted. So, and and it's not lost on me that when I tune into CFA work, I see Black girls everywhere. So what I would say is like, not only is that heart and head work and hands work and feet work challenging and difficult and usually without gratitude and usually where other people who don't live and love and look like us get credit for it, but we know. And I guess my invitation to the other Black girls who heard you ask this question that are on this call is like, what can we do for each other, knowing that we should believe people who, when they say who they are, when they show us who they are. The odds that, I would be lying to you if I said I thought that overnight, all of a sudden, all the people that benefit off of the labor of Black women would all of a sudden get it and understand it and be grateful for us. But I've been doing this work, as Alex said, for a long time, and I haven't seen it. But what I have seen is Black girls show up for each other when it's not expected, right? It's like maybe I text Tamika Mallory and I just say, "Hey, girl, how you doing?" Or any number of the Black women that were involved from the inception to the Target fast to now, right? And no shade to Jamal, but like it's just true, right? Maybe I text Alicia Garza and I'm just like, "Yo, like how you feeling?" Maybe I text you or any number of the Black women in leadership, right? We got a Black woman president at USW. There's so many Black girls in labor union leadership right now. Maybe we just care for our folks. Maybe we amplify their leadership. Maybe we expect that they're going to fuck up and we let them and we hold them with grace. The same grace we give to mediocre white men when they mess up every day. Donald Trump is the biggest loser of all time. And he doesn't get half of the skepticism, half of the punishment when he messes up, but let it be a Black woman in labor. My God. We gave it to her and she messed it up. She couldn't be responsible for it. But what would happen if those of us that actually love and value and cherish Black women, even if it's just other Black women, actually put our practice, like practice what we preached? I think it would actually make this thing about the 92% just backing out and not participating, or this, I think, misconception or overcorrection that rest is revolutionary, which it is not. Let me just be super clear. Rest is not revolutionary. It might be necessary, but it is insufficient, right? Um, it would make those things look absurd, and it would make doing it in healthy, right relationship look sexy as hell and irresistible. And so my own practice, Doc, is to be an embodied invitation to loving Black women out loud and consistently, and encouraging other people to do it because it looks and it feels really good. So yeah, I'll say this and shut up. I'm sorry to every Black girl out there that is exhausted and abused and underappreciated and undervalued, but is out here busting your ass. Like, I see you and I'm sorry and I love you and I'm grateful because you make my life better every day. And yeah, ask for help, because there's a whole grip. What I keep telling Black girls that are exhausted leaders is that there's a whole grip of Black girls just waiting on you to tell us we can turn up for you. The second you do, we're there.
All right. Well, I love you too. So thank you.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you for that. I see that Audrina actually would like to chime in, but also I want to give Alex an opportunity in case he would like to respond to that prompt as well. Alex, do you have anything you'd like to weigh in on that piece of discussion?
Wow. Well, I'll just first say I would not be here if it wasn't for the leadership of Black women. And that's hands down. And I'm talking about I was brought up in youth organizing movement from high school, and youth programs that were run by queer Black women. And I know I was saying a lot of random shit as a young 14, 15-year-old, and they called me in, they called me out, and I remember this one story of so I'm just share this one story, but just to say how important it is and how, for me, why when I was like saying in the beginning, like Ash is my leader, saying that explicitly as like an Asian man. And because Ash, I know, gets a lot of shit. It's like the sacrifice, and it's not to always like kind of dwell on those things. So there's two ways to look at it. One is like, yeah, we got your back, Ash. And also, we're not always going to be like asking for permission, approval. Sometimes we just gotta like we gotta run with things and be ready to make some mistakes at the same time. That's what I learned from Ash, from Alicia Garza, who I went to college with. So it's been like 30 years deep in the trenches, right? But I want to share this one story because I went to this youth camp and it was like 50 people, mostly black and brown folks. It was very few Asians, 6 weeks, and we did different weeks on racism, classism, heterosexism. The week of racism, they had all of us in our each ethnicity to talk about our own oppression. I had never heard like what black women went through, and basically what it was is like they just talked to each other, and then we just listened. And what I found really interesting at that time was like, I didn't even know what it meant to be Asian until I was asked about how I was racialized. And and yes, as a young Asian American, you feel you are in between. You're not white, you're not black, but you are a person of color. And I do remember at that time feeling feeling like I was under this this I drew a picture of like a devil like hovering over us, um and really putting pressures on us to be white, for example. And I remember talking about all this shit. It was like really random, like diarrhea of the mouth, because they're like, Asians, you all gotta talk. And I was just saying all this random shit. And it was I remember Nico, who was from Berkeley High, she came up to me afterwards and she was just like, I see you now. I see you. And I think that is like one of the most important moments in my life to be like, yeah, I'm not trying to like perform to be down, but I'm seriously, as an Asian American, you don't know what side you're on, right? And this is when they're cutting affirmative action. This is when they're doing hellish shit. And building those links in that kind of community. So I just want to say this is personal, it's political, and sometimes we just don't. And this is why I was talking about the coalition of willing, because we are all there. Like there are enough of us to move the ball, and there's enough people in our community that are trying to hold us back, like the Chinese right wing, like anytime there's a fuck up on that, the media, social media will lift up the Chinese for Trump person or the Asian person who blah 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 opposed affirmative action. I mean, it's just clockwork. And not to say they don't exist, but there are some like psych ops. Let me just same with like the black women sitting out thing. It's like there's psych op shit that's happening, and it's also real, but it's like
And
some of those
Alex,
things.
say what psychops is just in case.
Well, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's sort of like when the government or private enterprises are trying to use a narrative to like mess with your psychology to divide you essentially.
Yeah, it's like
And
psychological warfare.
yeah, yeah. And then so then that or now it's kind of like, is that AI or this, like we just get distracted. So I'm even taking a pause from social media, but I just come back to this thing. It's like Alicia and I, like we built together in San Diego. That's where we organized on campuses. And then we continue to work together in San Francisco, where she organized the Black community in the Bayview. And we organized the Chinese community that was in the Bayview, predominantly a Black community. And and there were moments where because we had relationship, we could struggle, and I think that is also important. The kinds of ways where we need to show up for each other. But what did it for us was like it wasn't just like we had relationship. We had to bring our own community together. And that was really important. So just to say, I wouldn't be here if Black women were not in leadership. And also, it's not like all Asian men are like me, right? I have to do my own work to organize folks as well. But that small core is very powerful and very visible in a lot of different places, but we would not see them like on social media all the time, right? So I'll just share that. And I mean, there's a lot more to say, but yeah, I just wanted to add that.
May I
Yeah.
ask a follow-up to that line is it's something I call the white adjacent blues that other racial groups get to kind of play with this being white adjacent. But what I want to is not get into that because I understand the appeal of whiteness, the power of whiteness. What I want to get into is how do we combat and reorganize because Asian Americans were used very strongly in affirmative action to end affirmative action. But what
Yes.
ultimately happened, like at Harvard, the Black numbers stayed the same, and the numbers
Mm.
that went down were the Asian numbers. And now we don't hear anybody talking about affirmative action
Exactly
anymore.
right.
So, how do we have that conversation? Because Asian American students are being discriminated against, but
Mm.
it's not by Black people. So how do we have that organizing conversation?
Woo.
Oh, I mean, Alex, I want to know what you think. What I would say is quite simple. And really, I think there's a way that some of me and Alex's OGs would be like, oh, well, like proximity to whiteness never liberated anybody, and they're not wrong. That is true. But I think we can fast forward into more contemporary language, right? That if it is true, just to me, it's like making the absurdity obvious. That if it is true that this country very swiftly is about to be majority people of color, which includes people of Asian descent, right? So if that is true, and that means that the reason that white nationalists are having existential crisis and becoming more and more violent is because they actually are about to be a numerical minority. They're also the ideology of white nationalism and white supremacy is also gasping for breath, right? It's like they're literally like chugging on that ideology to try to give it any sort of mainstream value, any sort of socially and culturally and economic truth, right? They are literally trying to make a dictatorship of this
Mm.
country so
Mm.
that they
Mm.
can rule. It's minority rule.
Mm. Mm.
So if that is true, materially, tangibly true, not even just like a tiny condition, but the very literal sense of impact on every single one of our lives regarding federal policy at the moment, then why would you want to be on a losing team? I
Mm.
want to be on a team that's trying to be the majority, that's trying to win. Like everybody can eat, everybody can share. Everybody can go to school, everybody can have a house, everybody can go to, it's like not super complicated, I think, to regular people. And my question back to them would be, where does it hurt? Like what hurts so much in your own lived experience that you would rather buddy up to a boss bully that lies to you? Like if I was talking to our union members, right, who voted for Trump, and let's just be real, it's some of us out here in these streets who are
Mm.
members of our
Mm.
unions, but who voted for Donald Trump in the same way that there are other sisters and brothers and siblings of color who do things that we don't think are in our best interests, like as a people, right? I could go to them and adversarially be like, yo, you did some dumb shit. Like it's crazy to me that you in a union, you voted for Donald Trump. What the fuck is wrong with you? Right? Like I could approach that way. And the odds of organizing them is minimal, right? We might have a good fight and that might make me feel good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm gonna organize them to why that doesn't make sense, right? But if I sit and I say, like, yo, what did they I like genuinely want to understand, not to critique you, but to understand, like to listen to you. What hurts so bad in your life as a union member or as an Asian American or otherwise marginalized and targeted community member that you were willing to vote for the boss that won't pay you, for he's a landlord that takes away your ability to get affordable housing. He's a racist, he's a chauvinist, he hates women, right? So if he stands against everything that I thought you were cool with, what hurt? And I think part of the reason we don't actually like meet people where they're at in that way is because we would have to admit that some of the reason people try to get proximity to whiteness isn't just about presumed privilege, it's about their disdain for us that we earned. That we earn, Doc. Like some of that is because we're like the left is pretentious and thinks they know every damn thing, thinks they're better than everybody, you know, glorifies poverty instead of glorifying the fact that we actually could thrive without destroying this planet and hoarding resources, right? Like if we just were cool people, right? People want to rock with me and Alex because we just cool people and we tell them the truth and we listen to them. We don't just talk at them, right? And I wonder what would happen with some of these Asian Americans who are being pimped by the Chinese right, some of these other brown folks that are being pimped by the Hindu right, some of these black folks that are being pimped by prosperity gospel snake oil salesmen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some of these dudes that are being pimped without getting a paycheck by patriarchal chauvinists who are just trying to consolidate their wealth and power at the expense of these people who they still think are backward, but will pay money to learn about how they can be alpha guys,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if we just listen to them and we're like, "Oh shit, yeah, like you hurting. I'm sorry. What can I do to repair so you feel like you belong to me and I belong to you?" Right? And I think if we just, if again, like to be humble and low ego and high impact, we're thinking and talking to our people in that way, I think we'd be shocked at how many more people would want to be in a mass project with us.
Does social media have a role to play in our collective revolution, or is it more distraction, infighting, and despair than it's worth? And if we should use it for liberation, how? And my question was actually along the lines of the axes that we've been talking about, really along the line of patriarchy, and also thinking about media. And I've been aware, really, probably the last maybe couple years, it's been much more in my consciousness, the ways in which a lot of content in media, in YouTube, TikTok, lots of other social media that I personally am not on, so don't see it all. But where there's a lot of things that are out there that, to my mind, really seek to create a greater gender divide, particularly between Black men and Black women, but also noticing the access of gender and race kind of across the spectrum, such that there are lots and lots of messages that I think that are very subtle, that kind of get into people very quickly and very easily, that influence people's thinking about who they are in relation to others and who others are in relation to themselves and their own needs. And so I'm just wondering if you have any insights or any thoughts about that in relation to the whole world of social media, media content, media expression, etc.
Mm, mm.
Mm.
All right, I'll start on this because it is related to the Chinese right wing as well. I think just just bringing it back to the first thing that I was saying was, and this is something I've heard from Ash many times. It's like we got to use all the tools, and this relates to infrastructure, which is also what Ash was bringing up. You know, I want to remind us that our movements have actually used social media to shift mass consciousness. I think where we have not been able to advance is actually absorbing them into organizations, right? So you can think about Occupy, you can think about Standing Rock, BLM, George Floyd, and most recently, I would say in the beginning on the immigration debate, that was like a leading thing Trump used. And because of us being able to use basically the violence to use it, basically it backfired on them. And that has shifted the consciousness of this country in ways that I don't think we've recognized enough. And again, yes, it was like two white people being killed, which was visibilized, right? But I think that the shift with ICE and how people view ICE, that shifted before the two white people that were gunned down. And then I also just think in Minnesota overall that there's been a shift in consciousness. So just to say, we have used it in our movements. Do we use it well? I don't think we do, and I still think we need to. For the Chinese right wing, as I was saying, there is a whole nother level that is global. that is, you know, a lot of the Chinese right wing uses a closed network called WeChat. And WeChat, for folks who don't know, is like the super app that is everything. It's like one single app that everybody uses in China, essentially for your money, for transactions, to communications, to like getting onto the bus, for example. Like you just like there's like just a lot of stuff it's used for. And we've grappled with this because the Chinese right wing has monopolized WeChat. And they have, you know, to the point where there's this, I remember when Trump had run in 2016 and people were talking about Jeb Bush. Anybody saying anything about Jeb Bush was like shut out. So in WeChat, if you get kicked out, right? So if you don't agree, you get canceled. And I think we have to learn how to use this kind of infrastructure. And so like right now, for example, what we do for WeChat, for example, is like we're not trying to fight the narrative war. We're there to actually collect information and intelligence about who is saying what and how do we pin people. So there's already been like two political candidates that were saying really racist shit on WeChat that we exposed publicly. And so some of the functions of WeChat now are to hold people accountable versus trying to like win on the narrative war. Okay, so that's setting that aside. The other thing I think it's important to just weave in, just to respond a little bit to Tracy's question before around being white adjacent and all of that, is that I think it's an organizing problem linked to infrastructure. We I like to say, or I don't like to say this, but I often say the the right wing is not winning per se. They're just not even contested. Like we are not contesting for the hearts and minds of people that slightly disagree with us. And I think that's everywhere, like in your union, in your workplace. And I think this is the hard part because there were plenty of people in the Chinese community that disagreed with me, you know. But luckily I had deep roots in Chinatown. So when the Chinese right came after me, I'm like, dude, my grandfather had a store in Chinatown that, you know, like we are anchored here. And then also the left would go and attack me as well because I was being too conciliatory and working with the the small businesses, for example, right? And so I think there's a muscle that needs to be built about how do you organize, how do you engage, and I would say the right wing is it's I think sometimes people say, oh, the right wing is different than like the working class. I think they have shifted the consciousness of our own people and our own communities. And I just want to lift up this one thing is that by you know, whatever the Pew research shows, that by 2030 um, Asian immigrants are going to be the highest in the country. Even I don't know, it might change now, but more than like Mexican immigrants, and a majority of those people are Chinese. And I think Chinese folks, Chinese Americans, we got to get our shit together about how are we going to organize, right? Because 30% of our community are always going to be new immigrants. And it's not like we have one curriculum. It's like you're constantly organizing people into this project we're calling, you know, the multiracial democratic, blah, you know, it's like that whole thing. But it is like we need that constant organizing and reminding people of all of these stories and what kind of legacy we're part of. But we also need infrastructure for that, right? And also many, like, and at least in San Francisco, many of the working class Chinese are in unions, and there's large populations. And so I just want to kind of lift up the organizing and infrastructure that's needed to address what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think your question has got my mind going. So I'm going to land there, but I'm going to start with the social media question, in part because I feel like what often happens with this question is Um, and Alex and I have been on 20,000 panels where this has probably been true, where like an elder asked that question to be like, fuck social media, organizing is in the streets. Or there's a young person who's like, y'all are outdated. We need to be talking to people where they build community, and where they're building community is online. And actually, what's dumb about it is it's a fake ass fight. Both things are true, right? So, to Alex's point about my point, that when our elders and ancestors said by any means necessary, they meant by all the means, they used technology. They used what social media they had at the time. Like, you think Malcolm X was just randomly going out with pinky rings and posing? Like, that was social media, that was technology at the time, right? Um, and so I'll say a couple of things. Let me start with the thing that'll make the elders proud, because them the homies, is that social media is a tool. It's not a strategy just in and of itself, right? So what can it be good at? It can be good at rapid information sharing. It can be good for narrative development. I'm going to save a little bit of what else I think it's good at for the close on that. It can be good for telling a story, about what you're doing. And and the thing that I love the most about it is sometimes at its best, we can tell the stories about what we're good at in ways that the opposition can't control, right? Now, let's be real. At the end of the day, the opposition owns a lot of this technology. So when I say that they don't control it, I mean, like, sometimes we break through the things that they can control. Does that make sense? And then, I think if I was being, critical of it, I would say, like, organizing is relational. And sometimes on socials, you don't know if the relationship you're building is with a human or a robot, or a person that's paid to be your opposition, right? It also can confuse us by thinking that like engagement is the same thing as power, and it's not, right? The danger of social media is that it can trick some of us into thinking that we're moving people to take collective action in their material lives, but actually all they're doing is amplifying bad sound bites, right? Or what our organizing is producing, or liking something, which is not the same thing as like a followship is not the same as a base, right? But on the flip side, and I say this as a proud New Disabled South board member, is that I have seen people build community and virtual space in ways that I never would have thought possible, even in the early 2000s, right? Like, there are disabled folks of all stripes who have built literal lives with one another, connection and relationship with one another, that is a space to be organized, right? Like, I see people starting gamers unions and all sorts of stuff that actually are power building projects that are based in virtual land. And what is also real is, like, in a time where post COVID we are relearning to be human together, having the opportunity to build with people virtually is part of the reason you want me on this webinar, right? Is that, no, I will never forget it. November 7th, what was supposed to be an hour-long webinar turned into 4 hours and 150,000 people coming together across difference to be like, what the fuck just happened and what do we do about it? And so I know from my own lived experience that there are ways that this technology can be used for good if we don't confuse our presence for the event here. I think in the broader media landscape, this is why, I hear Charlie Cobb in my head being like, organizing is being embedded in a community, and that community being able to take collective action that increases their power and agency and ability to set and actualize agendas, and that the future will depend on how we organize. I believe that about the media landscape. It actually doesn't fucking matter what Laura Ingraham says if my neighbor believes me more than she believes her, right? If my members believe me more than they believe, you know, all these other idiots that have media platforms whose evil names I don't want to put in this sacred space, right? So what happens is when Laura Ingraham talks trash about me, which she has already done twice in the last 12 months, my neighbors be like, Ash, you was on the news. And I'd be like, girl, which one? And they'd be like, that white girl on Fox News. And I'd be like, what'd she say? And they'd be like, she said you a terrorist. And I'd be like, well, what do you think? They like, you just a girl to live next door. Your grandmama and them was good people. They gave me tomatoes and we gave them hogs and everything's cool. Like, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. And I'm like, so what will you believe? My love, right? But I can do that because I got a base. I'm embedded in a community. Somebody know me somewhere. You know what I'm saying? The more that's true with our members, the more that these obvious, they should be so obvious, Chris, that these so obvious attempts to make me mad at you over something that is quantifiably untrue. The data showed that Black men didn't like ginormously go and support Trump. That's not what happened. White people told us that's what happened, and we believe them, right? So like what would happen if we were so tight? Like if we're going to call it relational organizing or whatever the fad word is this year, what would happen if we if we practice that? If you and I were so tight, hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder, that when some oppositional force, even if it was from our own folks, came to me and told me you was doing something, I'd be like, that's not his character. That's not him. And then if it is you, I can be like, nigga, what are you doing? You got me
Right.
out here, right? I'm willing to take an ass whooping that we collectively earn, but I'm not willing to do it at the expense of our people because some white person or other oppositional force told me that's what was happening. And I think the reason that we're not doing that and the media landscape is just rope-a-doping us is because we're not in that relationship anymore, and we need to be.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left, but I really want to get to this important question. You have complimented CFA for the work that we've done, but we've paid a price for it. If you had told me the profession of educators would be so strongly dismantled in barely a year, I wouldn't have believed you. But as my friend and colleague Preeti asked, we need some help getting recalibrated. So she says, what is the role of higher ed union of faculty, coaches, counselors, librarian, our role in terms of attacks against our industry, but also labor movement and our communities broadly, recognizing that we are a union that has really grown the anti-racist and social justice work. And or people also say this is a fight of our lifetime. So how can our faculty community support each other as we try to reimagine and build power together?
Ooh, Alex, you want me to take this one?
Go ahead. Yes.
Preeti, I'm so grateful for this question. And let me give some really quick context. My first labor union job, and maybe like only like official like W-2 union job was I'm pretty sure being the first Black woman to serve as a staff member of United Campus Workers when we were still just in Tennessee, the CWA local in Tennessee. Now it's spread. But at the time I was just like a newly graduated kid that basically told the union they were going to organize at my school. And when they didn't, I just signed people up on their website until they had to come and staff it. So, I think there's a legacy of young people, particularly out of stuff like the United Students, like Councils Association or USSA, the United Students Against Sweatshops, which I'm an alum of, who recognized that our campuses were sweatshops and that campuses deserve to be organized at the intersection of community, faculty, student, staff. So I think this question is really critical, and I've fangirled because I came from campus organizing. I think the thing I would say is like your union, and again, this is me just trying to reflect who I think you are. Your union isn't just a labor union. Y'all, my understanding is y'all got like 29,000 people in y'all's union across 23 campuses. That is bananagrams. It's rare. It's not normal. And most unions are just bargaining contracts back and forth. Y'all built an anti-racism infrastructure inside of a labor structure. Do you know how many AFL affiliated unions would love to do that? Right? Like it's something else. It's your superpower. And yes, it's been your responsibility. And yes, because of that responsibility, y'all have taken some massive hits this year. So I think I would say three things to you. I think the first thing I would say to you is like, y'all have to stop thinking about your union as separate from the community. Like your labor organizing and your community organizing is the same thing. Your members are the community. Your students' families are the community. When you bargain for instructional quality, you're bargaining for the future of working class Californians, right? You're doing it. And that's why they're fighting you, because you're successful at it, right? When you fight layoffs at Bakersfield, you're fighting for the economic engine of that region, right? Name it that way. Say that. Say that you're not just, working on faculty working conditions, but y'all are who are fighting for people who get access to education and who doesn't. Y'all are making that fight the real fight. That's a community fight. It's not just an industry fight, right? It's how we go from singular sector to multi-sectoral. To Alex's point about like us needing these multi-tactical, multi-sectoral, multi-ideological fights, right? That's how you do it. That's the first step. Second step is like, I remember a time after we started the movement for Black Lives, where we were talking to Palestinian comrades in Palestine. In fact, we were meeting with the founder of the BDS movement, and Omar looked at me and he said, "Ashley, y'all got to quit treating yourselves like you're just some small little American movement." And I want to say that to CFA, y'all got to quit thinking about yourselves as some little rinky-dink union. Y'all are proof of concept. You embody anti-racism inside a union structure and you made your union more powerful, not less, right? You pushed SEIU to go further, not be more conservative. The Shortchanging Students Report, the sanctuary union position, the EEOC lawsuit, those came out of your ARSJ transformation. Y'all did that. Other unions and other institutions are just watching y'all. Your role is to model what it looks like when you actually do the thing instead of just talking about the thing. So that's number two. And then last but certainly not least, and I think this goes back to Doc's earlier point, like on supporting each other, it's like this fight that we are in this political moment is the fight of my lifetime, right? Like legacy will be built or crumble under the decisions that we make to fight or not to fight right now. And that puts a particular level of urgency on it for me. But I also have to hold that the dialectical truth is that it's not all of it can be a sprint. There's some shit that I can do right now because time has bent in our favor and we should drive this thing like we stole it. But there's other stuff that like I might not see, right? I might not see. So what should I do? I should be increasing relationship. The buddy system is more important now than maybe it's ever been. Chapter to chapter, campus to campus. The campus is under the most pressure right now. Bakersfield, LA, San Francisco, others need campuses with more stability to show up and show out with and for them. This isn't like a symbolic action. This is like materially, how do we support the folks in our union and then beyond? Like, how do we support the other most disenfranchised workers, disenfranchised community members in a moment where we should be structure testing and preparing to have to shut this whole thing down? How do I show up to their rallies? How do I support in budget fights? How do I support in just amplifying their stories, to Chris's earlier point about social media and the press? That's what solidarity inside of a union and community worker power building opportunities could actually look like. So I feel excited about CFA as the gold standard. And it doesn't mean that the attacks weren't impactful and aren't impactful. I get it, they are. What I'm suggesting is that to Alex's earlier point is that might be evidence that the shit you're doing is right on time. Don't take your foot off the gas, like drive the thing like you stole it.
Thank you for that. And so we just have a couple minutes left. So what I'd like to do is actually combine a couple questions because they relate to several of the things that you just brought up, Ashley, which are talking about solidarity and also talking about love. So Tad says, thanks you both. Thanks for speaking about the common ground by bearing witness to each other's pain. That takes a courage born out of an immense love, a bell hooks love, a Colette Pichon battle love. Rabab Abdul Hadi says, can you please speak to the solidarity and alliance of women and men around the world who love and support people here in the US? The last little component of that, though, with Tad's question is, how do we listen, show compassion and love without giving white folks like himself a pass or it being interpreted as such?
Alex, I'm looking at you, but I can go again if
Yeah,
you need.
no. I'm gonna go. But yeah, I'm just grateful to have had this space and really learned so much about CFA. And one thing I would just lift up is some of the most amazing organizers have come out of CFA, and also the students have come out of the CSU system. And the work that you all are doing is it's not just being like a professor, but you're really holding the imagination of the future. And that's really important because so much has moved because of the young people, and there's not enough supporting them to make that happen. In terms of this question, I just want to say, I'll just share this last story. And because I like to tell stories, and we had our 50th anniversary for the Chinese Progressive Association, and it was intergenerational, meaning youth as young as 14 to the OGs who are in their 80s, working class people, Chinese immigrants who were 30, 40, 50 years old. And on the panel, and actually Kim Jerome, I don't know if he's on this thing, but Kim's on the CPA board, but he was the OG on the panel, and he was talking about how we were part of the Black Power movement. And we had Red Guards who were also there who talked about the connections with the Panthers. And the reflection from the workers, the Chinese immigrants, they were surprised to actually have met actual Chinese people that were connected to this historical legacy. And I'm bringing this all up because in the space, it was built on community, it was built on love, and people saw themselves in the history. They didn't know, like Chinese immigrants do not know they're part of this history. They literally do not know. And if they know, it's just a footnote. But because of that, we had people who were saying, like, I need to get off of that WeChat. We need to get off of that. And this was during COVID too. And then they were like, I need to remember to come back to spaces like the Chinese Progressive Association so we can remember that we are part of a bigger fight.
Mm.
I mean, I think we have to stop acting like liberation is a domestic project because it's just not at this point. I'm not saying that there's not work that we as folks that live in the belly of the beast shouldn't do. But if we're talking about forces that we're fighting like authoritarianism or racial capitalism or the surveillance state, all of those things that I just said are global. And the people that are resisting those forces around the world are not just cheering from the sidelines. Like we're all in the same fight together. So when I think about people in South Africa or Palestine or Colombia or the Philippines, sending solidarity to little podunk organizers like myself in the United States, like that's not charity, that's recognition, that's amplification. They see what's happening here because it's happening to them. It's the same fucking playbook. I just told you these people are not innovative. They have adapted this playbook for local conditions: austerity, criminalization of dissent, attacks on education, like y'all are living, weaponization of the government and its agencies against the people, like what's also happening to you. And I just want to name specifically that the people who have shown up for us internationally are disproportionately women and gender nonconforming people who are leading movements under conditions far more dangerous than what most of us are facing. They're not waiting for permission, to Alex's point. They're not waiting for the conditions to improve. They're building under the fire that they're in. And that should really humble us and it should challenge us. I think the practical question for those of us in this room is, are we in relationship with those movements or are we just aware of them? Because solidarity isn't just a statement, it's a practice, it's material, it's showing up when it costs us something, which y'all know far too much about because your system is being investigated right now, partly because your campuses had the courage to engage with global struggles instead of pretending that they don't exist. And I think, I think to one, I want to shout out to Colette Pichon Battle as well. She's amazing. I think to that final question, compassion and accountability are they don't have to be intention unless we make them so, right? They're within the same practice. I often tell people that like the bar for entry is not perfection, especially for white people who often come from a legacy of white supremacy showing up and manifesting as perfectionism. um Perfection isn't the bar for me, accountability is, and punishment isn't the goal or outcome. If you fuck up, for me, accountability is, right? So if you are accountable and you mess up when you mess up because you're not perfect, then I can meet you with grace because I also will fuck up and I will need that same grace. So accountability without love is punishment. Neither one builds anything. And I think here's what giving somebody a pass actually looks like. It's letting them do harmful things, let harmful things happen and not naming it because I don't want to damage the relationship. And if I did that, that's not compassion. That's being conflict avoidant, right? And masking it in compassion's clothes. So real love, that kind of love that Bell Hooks wrote about, requires honesty. It requires saying the hard thing out loud, the truthful thing out loud, and doing it with love, because I believe that the person in that relationship can hold it, you know, and bearing witness to each other's pain across racial lines. Doing that isn't saying that what happens is okay. It's just saying I see it too and I'm not leaving. And I think that's going to be an important call in to the left and to progressive forces. To be in this broad multicultural, multiracial big tent is going to require us to not just leave when it gets hard. And I think for white folks specifically, the pass that you're worried about giving yourself isn't actually about compassion, it's about comfort. The question to keeping yourself in check, I think, is, am I being compassionate or am I being comfortable? Am I sitting with someone's pain because I'm in real relationship with them, or because it makes me feel like I'm doing the work without having to change anything? And I think that's why colleagues that are Black and brown and other folks of color or otherwise underprivileged people are frustrated, because they feel like y'all are too damn comfortable. The test is like, what did the compassion produce? If you listen to someone's pain and then you went and you organized other white people in the union around it, that's solidarity. But if you listen and you felt moved and it was so articulate and whatever, and then you went home, you just consume. That's just consumption, right? That's the same listening. It's not producing a different outcome. The difference to me is what you do after you've consumed it, and not waiting for Black and brown and other marginalized and targeted community folks to tell you that you're doing it right, because that's another form of centering yourself. So I think what we have to do is invite and encourage and support our colleagues to do the work, to get it wrong sometimes, to be accountable when you do get it wrong, and then to keep going, not starting from scratch, but starting from the place of the lesson that you learned. And I think CFA is best positioned in our labor movement to model that, to do that.